I can't trust Mr. Irving to render accurately what I said in my report. And this happened time and again. He would twist what I'd written in my report into something else. There was an extraordinary moment late on. We got to the point where Hitler has written a so-called political testament just as he's about to shoot himself in a bunker in April 1945. And he has a bit there where he kind of implicitly admits that he's responsible for the Holocaust. And he says, the Jews have had to pay for their crimes, meaning in his mind, the Jews have organized the bombing of German cities because Hitler, thought that Stalin, Roosevelt, and Churchill were all tools of a Jewish conspiracy. Even if only in a more humane way, says Hitler in the political testament. And Irving said to me, so you think the gas chambers were humane? And I said, no, I didn't. It's Hitler who thinks that. And at that point, someone in the public gallery shouted, Jesus! So you just couldn't trust him to give an accurate. It's rather like someone once said of a notoriously slippery British Prime Minister Harold Wilson, if he swallowed a 6-inch nail, it would come out the other end as a corkscrew. And I felt there was a certain parallel.
It's a lot of rhetorical games, and
yes.
He's watching his videos. He speaks very fluidly, very quickly, and he sort of dazzles with new information, high detail.
That's right.
And so perhaps this is why he was so compelling to such a large audience.
Absolutely. The problem is, though, if you subject it to a detailed examination, most, if not all of the detail, is simply wrong. It's simply manipulated, falsified, mistranslated, misinterpreted. I mean, all of those things. You cannot trust a word he says. It may be that some of the things he writes are true, but you have to check.
Right. Well, we're going to come to some of the key theories he posited, but I wondered if you might have had a sort of insight into this man's mind, because he's presented with evidence that disproves what he was thinking along the way. He didn't seem to, and from my looking into it in preparation for today's conversation, he seems to stand by his positions to this day.
Yeah.
And this is despite thorough evidence proving not just that he's got the salience of different things in the wrong order, but that he's actually just completely wrong on so many things.
Yeah, this came out in the cross-examination of Irving by Richard Rampton, QC, who was acting for Penguin Books and Lipstadt. It was mostly the trial, which incidentally ended in an all-round victory for Lipstadt and Penguin Books. Mostly it was a long, boring tedium, but punctuated by moments of high drama, as it was, which is what you see in the film, of course. And one of those moments where Rampton handed a copy of a German document, and Rampton learned German in his 60s, especially for the trial. It was astonishing, absolutely astonishing. And he handed the Irving a document, and Irving was quite frequently trying to prove that the documents Rampton was using were not authentic. So Rampton says, "Is this authentic?" And so Irving said, looked at it, it just appears to be. There's there's all the different marks and so on. Right, can you read a bit of it? So it says it's from the SS at an extermination camp where the Jews are bundled into vans and driven out, and the exhaust was fed into the sealed back, and the Jews were asphyxiated. And over a period of time, 92,000 Jews were asphyxiated, killed in this way. Right, thank you, Mr. Irving. And Irving actually said, "Oh, that's quite an achievement. I mean, astonishing." But he said, "Yes, very efficient," or words to that effect. And so Rampton said, turn to page so-and-so of your book, and read out this passage, which he'd marked. Gassing was used by the SS only on an experimental basis, if at all. And Rampton just said, "Mr. Irving, do you think 92,000 is experimental?" And of course he had to say, "No, it's not." And time after time, Rampton forced Irving to make very damaging admissions of that kind, so much so that Nick Griffin, who was the leader of the BNP at the time, actually denounced Irving for making too many concessions. And at that point, then Irving retracted some of his concessions, which then, of course, didn't do any good at all, because the judge thought he concluded from that it was he would just changed his mind for political reasons. So that was one of those very dramatic moments, I think. But in the end, of course, you couldn't. You can't convince somebody who is as fanatically believes in his own particular lines. The press, of course, had a field day at the end of the trial, when Irving lost, and the cartoonists all had the same particular inspiration, and so in a lot of newspapers was a cartoon of Irving looking at an advertising hoarding for whichever newspaper it was. Irving loses trial, and Irving saying that trial never happened. So, and there was an extraordinary moment right at the end when Irving had to give his concluding speech. And in the excitement of delivering the concluding oration, one point he called the judge mein Führer, my leader, which is what the Nazis called Hitler. We all burst out laughing, Even could even see a kind of wintry smile passing across the judge's face before he called us all to order. And in my office in Cambridge, a couple of days later, I was phoned up by a psychiatrist who was writing about Freudian slips, inadvertent slips of the tongue that have some deeper cause. And he said, do you really think he said mein Führer? I said, well, I can hardly believe it, but yes, he did. I was there, Wow. How do you explain it? I said to him. And Irving said, Irving had said mein Führer. Well, how does he explain it? Well, he was born in 1938, and his father went away to sea, and his mother must have said something like, she's going to fight for Mr. Churchill against Hitler. And Irving was so upset by this, as he was only like 4 or 5, that he found in Hitler a kind of substitute father figure, and Churchill became his arch villain. And all the way through his life, he has always thought of Hitler as a benign authority figure. And what was the judge but a benign authority figure? Because the judge was clearly concerned that Irving could appeal on the grounds that he was disadvantaged by not being represented by a barrister. And the judge was therefore always complimenting Irving on his knowledge of the law, which I have to say, my view was pretty well zero. But the judge was always insisting that Irving knew his way around the law, and the judge was actually telling Irving what questions to ask me in the witness box. He would say, "You're concentrating on these just tiny little slips. Some of them are there in Professor Evans' reports, and others are not. But that's no good. You've got to focus on the really important allegations made in Professor Evans' report. Why don't you skip another 50 pages and go on to the next one?" But Irving disregarded that. But the judge was a benign authority figure. Hitler was a benign authority figure, and Irving confused the two in his excitement.
Wow. So
I should say also that it's not in the movie because it's a bit unseemly, as it were.
Yeah, quite.
But it was quite a moment.
Of course, we're now entering the realm of speculation, but this is his father. Was his father killed in the Second War?
No, I think, as sailors often do, he was a naval officer. He found a wife in another port or something like that.
Okay, so Irving didn't have a relationship with his father.
Didn't come back.
Didn't come back.
No.
And so, again, this is speculating. It's something like Churchill was responsible for sending off everyone.
Something like that,
Okay.
yeah. But I'm not usually convinced by the psychologizing, but I thought that was a pretty plausible argument, actually.
Right. Well, it's interesting because Churchill, as the chief villain of World War II, is one of these suggestions that is being popularized. It's been popularized after Irving by Pat Buchanan, which we'll come to, but again by Darrell Cooper and the like. So we will come to that. I just wondered, with regards to the case, what you think would have happened if you'd lost.
Oh, well, yes. Well, as I said, we couldn't have been able to call anybody a Holocaust denier. I couldn't have been able to publish my book and other books. And even after a comprehensive victory for Lipstadt and Penguin Books over Irving in the case, 6 publishers turned down my book because they were worried about, as I said, about the costs should Irving actually sue and, be able and win. So it was a partial victory for freedom of speech. We were able to continue, and people like us, serious historians, to calling out Holocaust denial. Irving was able to carry on denying the Holocaust.
Right.
But it would have been a serious blow for freedom of speech had he won.
And the film suggests that not only did you have to prove that he was a Holocaust denier, but that
that was the easy bit, actually.
That was the easy bit. You had to prove that he was intentionally
manipulating the sources. That was it. We had help from.
How on earth do you do that? How can you?
Well, you can just put there's the source, there's Irving's quote, and they're different.
But can't he say, "Oh, I made a mistake"?
No. The point there, and that's a very important one, which the judge picked up actually, which I made in the witness box, is that, of course, historians get things wrong sometimes. They make little mistakes. I've done that, But if you're just careless, then the effect on your arguments is random. Some of your mistakes will favour your argument. Some of them will tell against it. Some of it will have nothing to do with it. But Irving's mistakes were not random. They were all there supporting his view that Hitler was a good guy and Churchill was a bad guy. All in the same direction. That means they're deliberate.
I see. Okay. So this was the biggest story in the country. It was all over the press. How was that for you, being in the centre of a media storm?
Well, it was a very sobering experience because Deborah Lipstadt wasn't allowed to talk. The defence stopped her from saying anything because the focus had to be relentlessly on Irving and what he'd said and written. But as soon as the judgment was given, she held a press conference, and then my phone started ringing, my mobile, and I started, after she'd finished, and I was answering, media questions from Germany and America, all over the place, And then about an hour later, the news broke that the South African cricket captain, Hans Cronje, had, I think I'm right in saying, had been taking bribes or had been, behaving badly. And that was it.
Yeah.
The Irving story was gone. So it was an incredibly sobering experience. That's how the media work, I'm afraid. They move on very, very rapidly from one story to a new.
Thanks for watching this clip from the Winston Marshall Show. You can click here to watch the full episode, and for more clips like this one, don't forget to subscribe. And as always, be well.